everybody, and welcome to another video here on the channel. Today, we are doing our very first top 10 video, and I had this idea because I was in the middle of filming a video, and it didn't even record anything that I had done. I was done with it, did it all, and it didn't record. And it made me really frustrated, and I thought, what's something I could think of really quickly? And while doing that, it prompted a bunch of ideas for videos, and I figured, let's do the top 10 most legendary monster trucks of all time. I feel like this is a video that's long overdue. This is a monster truck page. I feel like everyone should have their own opinion on what the top 10 most legendary monster trucks of all time are. And that's what this list is. This is simply just my opinion. And this is all about getting to interact with you guys, see what you guys think, let you guys share what you also think are the most legendary trucks of all time. So we have the top 10 of them. And this is not just Monster Jam. This is not just recent. And we're going to go from 10 all the way down to number 1. We're going to start, though. I've got 3 honorable mentions that I debated putting on this list and had on this list at one given point and shifted things around because there's so many legendary trucks. Let's get that out of the way. There's so many legendary trucks that are not going to be on this list, and it's just quite simply because I chose to do 10 of them. These are the 10 most legendary of all time, in my opinion. So with the first honorable mention, we have Avenger. Avenger is one of the most legendary monster trucks of all time, and at one point I actually had it in the top 5, but after discussion with one of my friends, I came to the realization that Avenger is mainly popular because of who drives it. Jim Kohler is what made Avenger popular, and yes, the bodies are so special, and they're so cool, and Avenger is a legendary truck. But Jim Kohler in Avenger is what is so legendary. The name Avenger might not be that legendary if Jim Kohler was not the driver that he is, but I still wanted to talk about it. The second honorable mention today is Excalibur, a legendary monster truck that has been around for a long time and in the 90s was a dominant force. The main reason why it's not here on this list is because it was not the greatest of all time back in the day, and it really hasn't ran at all since. Yes, Tomfoolery Motorsports is starting to revive the truck, and maybe 5 years from now, if that truck is still driving, then it will be in the top 10. But for right now, it just didn't last long enough for it to be in that top 10. And the last honorable mention that I have is Son of a Digger. Now, Son of a Digger is a legendary name. We all know it, the Son of the Legend. I mean, this truck literally says Son of a Digger. Gravedigger, such a big name in the sport. But Ryan Anderson, again, is the only reason why this truck is popular. And I don't want to take anything away from it. Everyone who watches Monster Jam knows the name Son of a Digger, and it probably would be at number 12 or so in a bigger list. It just can't quite be in that number 10 just yet. Give it maybe another 4 or 5 years, and Son of a Digger will definitively be in the top 10. But with that, let's get into the top 10, starting us off with King Crunch. I debated a lot about putting King Crunch on this list. I knew it deserved to be in the conversation. If it wasn't in the top 10, it would have been an honorable mention. King Crunch was one of the most legendary monster trucks of all time. Scott Stevens was one of the more legendary drivers in the 90s, and Colt Stevens became a Monster Jam driver mainly because of how big of a name his father was with that King Crunch truck. And the name King Crunch didn't just last in the 90s, it brought itself into the 2000s and really became a big name. I mean, King Crunch was at most of the World Finals for the first 10 of them. It was always such a big name. If you knew monster trucks really until about 2010, you knew the name King Crunch, and you knew it was a very big name in the 90s, so that's why it's got to be at number 10 on this list. At number 9, we have a name that Tom Meents was a big part of, Monster Patrol. Monster Patrol is one of the most unique monster trucks from the 90s, a truck that was really different with the body that it put out there, with that huge spoiler on the back, and it still drives today. You can catch Monster Patrol at a good bit of independent events throughout the country. It's not at the higher legacy as some of the trucks we're about to get to because it never really stayed at that peak level. But because this truck is still around, it has to be on this list, and it has to be at number 9. It would be higher, though, if it was more of a prevalent name in the industry today. But it's without question that Monster Patrol is such a legendary identity in the monster truck world. It's too bad it never really got to be a big thing in Monster Jam, but it's still one of the building blocks for where we are today. At number 8, I am giving this spot to Bounty Hunter. And I think a lot of people might be a little surprised. I knew Bounty Hunter had to be in 8 through 10. And I debated putting it a little bit higher, but I've got to say, Jimmy Cretin took Bounty Hunter and made it such a legendary name. And again, you can say, well, yeah, Bounty Hunter would be nothing without Jimmy Cretin, of course. But the way Jimmy Cretin drove that truck, if you watch monster trucks, you know what Bounty Hunter is. I mean, Bounty Hunter is dominant in the independent circuit today. You go to an independent event and they say the name Bounty Hunter, people start cheering even if they have no idea what monster trucks are. It's not necessarily the same for Avenger everywhere you go. I can tell you right now, I was at an event at my racetrack last year, and Bounty Hunter was here, and I can guarantee you no one in the stands watched Monster Jam today at all. They were cheering just as loud for Bounty Hunter as they did when they heard Dennis Anderson's name. That just goes to show you how legendary that truck is. It does have a legacy. It deserves to be on this list. Going down to number 7, I put Taurus in the number 7 spot. This is a really big truck in the Monster Jam industry and in the monster truck industry. This truck was just, I couldn't tell you a single driver who's ever driven it, but I know Taurus, and I know Taurus is a legendary machine. This thing was such a big name in the late 90s and early 2000s. It was even brought back by Mike Thompson at MetLife Stadium a few years back. It's just a big name that was so prevalent in the monster truck world. It always drew a crowd. It always was one of the top contenders. So I have to put it at number 7. It probably would be higher, like I said with some of these other spots, if this truck stayed around. If it was still driving today, that's what you're going to see with some of these other trucks that are coming up. We're getting into the trucks that stood the test of time. They've been able to stick around for over 30 years, whereas Taurus, unfortunately, could not. At number 6, we get into our first truck that is driving in Monster Jam today. That is El Toro Loco. And a lot of you might be wondering, well, how is El Toro Loco legendary? You ask every single person in the United States of America, not just monster truck fans, to name 5 monster trucks. Obviously, most of them are not going to be able to, but I guarantee you, out of the people that can, El Toro Loco will be on a majority of those lists and over any of the trucks I just named. Because you go to a monster truck show today, El Toro Loco is going to be there 90% of the time in a Monster Jam event. It's just become such a popular name. The fans love it. They've really blown it up in the Latino community. It's become a staple in the sport. So much so that El Toro Loco has kind of outgrown Max D in terms of popularity in the last couple of years, which is crazy to say, but that's why it's got to be at number 6. El Toro Loco has proven to be a dominant force, and 10 years from now might be in the top 3 of this list, but for right now, it's just going to sit outside of the top 5, where we get now at the number 5 spot. Barefoot. This is a legendary monster truck identity. Everybody knows the Bigfoot, Barefoot, those are the big ones. But Barefoot was always right there in the late 90s. Any event you'd go to, Barefoot was going to dominate if he was competing there. And you could even still see Barefoot today. It's still an independent. It's obviously not at the same level that it was once back in the day, but it's one of those trucks that's withstood the test of time. This truck has been around since the 90s, not on and off. This truck has competed throughout the United States since it became a thing, and it's always been relatively competitive. I mean, obviously it's not at the same level that it used to be, but Barefoot was really competitive throughout monster trucks all around into the 2000s after dominating in the 90s. So it goes without saying that this truck should be on the list. The question was where, and I put it at number 5. Now at number 4, we have USA 1. USA 1 is honestly one of the most underrated monster trucks of all time. And you might be saying, how are you putting it at number 4 if you think it's underrated? Well, that's because a lot of people forget that USA 1 even exists. This truck still drives just like Barefoot most of the time at the same events as Barefoot these days. But USA 1 was not only a monster truck, but it captured the patriotic spirit of what monster trucks is about. That's what makes it so great. That's why it is in the top 5 on this list, and that's why monster truck fans love it and know it. This is one of the few monster trucks, which we're now getting into the top 4. These are the monster trucks that people who don't even watch monster trucks probably have either seen or heard of these trucks before. And USA 1, maybe not everybody knows it, but you ask people, like I just said, you ask everyone in the United States, I guarantee you there are going to be people who can name USA 1 as a monster truck that have never been to a monster truck show before. It is a legendary name representing the United States of America, and it gets the number 4 spot. At number 3, and I think you guys can probably figure out what the top 3 are at this point, but number 3 is Max D / Maximum Destruction. Tom Meents made this truck as legendary as it is. And again, I hate to sound like a hypocrite here by saying that Jim Kohler made Avenger famous, so that's why he's not in the top 10. But Tom Meents made Max D famous because he is, in my opinion, the greatest monster truck driver of all time. That we might get to in a later video. But Max D and Maximum Destruction is one of the most legendary names ever. Unfortunately, it's kind of been surpassed in the last couple years as Tom has kind of slowed down in his career. There's not as many drivers, but there was a period of time where there were just as many Gravedigger fans and Max D fans. I mean, they were tied, if not, going back and forth. And obviously, it's still a pretty large group of people who are Max D fans first, but back in the day, and I don't know how many of you watching this video can speak to it, but I remember when I would go to events in the late 2000s and early 2010s, it was a competition between fans. It was a true rivalry amongst the fan bases of which one's better, Max D or Gravedigger. Max D has always been incredible. The moves that Tom would do, the amazing jumps, the crashes, the energy that Tom brought with the truck every time this truck came out. This is such a perfect spot for this truck. I wish it could be higher, and I feel like Tom Meents' career ending the way it did. Obviously, Tom Meents was Max D, whereas some of the other trucks on this list were able to live on after the driver of the truck kind of left the industry. But Max D is still so special. It has to start off the number 3 spot, which gets us to number 2, which I am giving to Bigfoot. Obviously, if you're watching this video, you knew that Bigfoot was going to be on this list. The question was, is it number 1 or is it number 2? I have to go with number 2. And if anyone's going to argue with me, my pure counter argument is Bigfoot was and is arguably the most well-known monster truck throughout history. If you know monster trucks, you obviously know the name Bigfoot. But people who don't know monster trucks know the name Bigfoot. It is probably the most household monster truck name of all time, but the number 1 spot is as well. And the reason for that is because the number 2 spot, Bigfoot, hasn't competed in Monster Jam in 25 years. And say what you will, I understand that Bigfoot's legendary and the fact that it's been able to stay legendary this entire time. Bigfoot has stayed relevant for the last 25 years without needing to drive in Monster Jam. That's pretty darn impressive. But if Bigfoot drove in Monster Jam, it would probably tell the story that it is not the top monster truck out there, because the truck at number 1 is Gravedigger. There is no question that the Gravedigger-Bigfoot rivalry is the longest thing going. But Bigfoot was the first monster truck. That's why it's in the number 2 spot. But you cannot deny that once Gravedigger became a thing, Bigfoot was no longer the top dog. Gravedigger came in and beat Bigfoot all the time. Yeah, Bigfoot was legendary. Yeah, Bigfoot was the first monster truck. But this is undoubted in my eyes that Gravedigger is the most legendary. You put Bigfoot and Monster Jam in 2000 alongside Gravedigger, and you put the 2 best trucks, you got Bob Chandler and Dennis Anderson, and they both have full careers in Monster Jam. Well, Dennis Anderson's going to have a bigger, longer career. Obviously, Bob Chandler's a little bit older, but it doesn't change the fact that Dennis Anderson and the Gravedigger name was just bigger and better than Bigfoot once it hit the circuit. And you ask everybody in the world to name a monster truck, I guarantee you most of them are going to say Gravedigger over Bigfoot. It's just the simple way things are going to go. You talk to random people on the street. When I tell people that I like monster trucks, they go, oh, Gravedigger. It's just the way it is. Gravedigger is the most legendary monster truck of all time, and quite honestly, it's never going to be topped. We will go 100 years in the future, 200 years in the future. Nothing will ever be bigger than Gravedigger. In fact, it might still be driving at that point. So, to me, there's no question. Let me know in the comments what you think of this list. What would you replace? What would you switch with what? What do you think is the most legendary monster truck of all time? And as always, please let me know other recommendations for doing videos like this. I'm always open to recommendations. I read all your comments, and I take them all into consideration. So, thank you so much for watching, and we will see you all in the next one.